Welcome back, or welcome front if it's the first time joining us. This is the Adventure Game Hotspot Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about if and why adventure games have been dumbed down. And to do so, as always, we have Jack, and we also have Tom. But before we introduce Tom, Jack, tell us what's happened this week at the Hotspot.
It wasn't the most sexiest week for new releases, but there were some interesting releases. There's a first-person sci-fi game called Titan Station, and of course, any space station is going to have gone disastrously wrong. So you have to wander around and figure out what's happening there. The co-founder of Playdead has released a very limbo or Inside-esque new puzzle platformer called Somerville. There's a really interesting auto mystery game for mobile devices called Evidence 111. It has a really impressive voice cast, including Rosamund Pike. So yeah, there's a little something for everything. We announced a few new games. There's a new live-action FMV game from Wales called The Isle Tide Hotel. And there's a co-op game, if you've got a friend that likes to play with you, called Sherlock and Watson, A Study in Scarlet. That's out in early access. It's not finished yet, but it is available now if you want. And content-wise, we had a good week, too. We had reviews of narrative adventure with not much gameplay, which I think we'll end up talking about later on, called As Dusk Falls. And there's a very Day of the Tentacle-like adventure called Justin Whack and the Big Time Hack. And then there was a really sterling review of a debut adventure by some guy named Tom Hardwidge called Lucy Dreaming.
Yeah, you're very, very kind in that review. That's going on my wall.
Hey, we aren't generous. We just call it like we see it. So you earned what you got.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. It was a really. I know we're going to get onto this later, but it was a really interesting review to read. And obviously I'm going to find it interesting because it said how lovely my game was.
Yeah, praise me.
It made some really interesting points as well, which I've kind of seen a lot of the other side of in some of the other reviews. And then actually seeing that it was quite nice. It sort of rebuked some of the points that are sort of made. I don't know if that was consciously done or, but there have been other reviews of kind of my game which have had a very different kind of take on it.
Really?
And it kind of and it was nice and kind of leveling to see kind of the other side of the story and what I believe. Obviously, I put it out there thinking I quite like these things in it. And it was nice to kind of see that sort of reflected back. So it was good.
Yeah, we certainly weren't trying to counterbalance anything else, but we try to be thorough and as objective as any review can be.
And Jack said it. There's a few that we haven't necessarily said it's a good game. In fact, I've got a review coming out that I'm not the meanest, but I'm also not the kindest. Yours rated top drawer. I would have never known that this was your first game. So tell us a little bit about yourself and give 2-3 minutes to talk about you and your quick adventure into adventuring.
That's dangerous because I talk a lot. So okay,
we'll talk a little bit more as it progresses too.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I won't give you kind of full sort of potted history, but essentially, I started doing this during kind of the UK COVID lockdown, essentially. I'd sort of played about with making little games, little sort of puzzle games and things in Flash. I used to sort of do quite a lot of work for advertising agencies. Mm-hmm. So lots of little things like that. And I've always wanted to make an adventure game. I've always loved point-and-click adventures when I was growing up in the 90s. So when I had a bit of free time on my hands during COVID, work sort of dried up a little bit, so decided to kind of give it a go. Long story short, I kind of ended up suddenly discovering that there were an awful lot of other people who are already doing this, and who I had no idea. I had no idea that indie dev was even a thing. I had no idea that there was a kind of a community there of people already making games, that there were engines available that would make life so much easier for me. So it was a really steep learning curve, sort of diving straight in with that. And I've got a kind of design background, so I'm basically taken on everything. I've got a design and a sort of web dev background, so coding I'm quite familiar with, graphics I'm quite familiar with. So putting that together and creating a game, I've got a fair amount of transferable skills from pretty much sort of my previous career to do that with. But obviously, have never actually designed puzzles or I've not written a story since I was in school. So I mean, you're talking like sort of 25, 30 years ago was the last time I actually like sat down and like wrote a story. So I've kind of had to sort of struggle with that, and kind of wondering, is it any good? What are people going to think of the ending? Are people going to care? And that sort of thing. And that's what's been one of the things that's been really nice, is that actually even when the feed after we're released, when the feedback's come back, even if it's kind of negative feedback, it's always been constructive, and it said, and it's shown me just how much people genuinely care. Especially about the ending, there were things like, oh, actually, I don't think you should have done that to the main character, or I don't think you should have done this, and it was like, oh wow, people actually really, really care about the characters I've created. That was something I wasn't really kind of prepared for. I was just expecting it to be a consumable. Someone would play it, they'd have a bit of fun, they'd have a few laughs, they'd put it down and play something else. But actually, it seems to have really kind of stuck with people. So it's a complete roller coaster learning curve like this,
And there they are in the background.
Not going into too much detail about the game itself, but that's sort of my sort of journey in a nutshell over the last couple of years.
Well, can you show us what the game looks like? I love the cassette aspect that you have there. It looks really cool. Yeah.
Looks like it's strategically placed merchandise. This is strategically placed merchandise.
Right. You are a marketer. You just said that you were in advertising.
Moment, I am just surrounded by all the Kickstarter rewards. So I have got like envelopes and jiffy bags and bubble wrap and just shit everywhere that I've just got to try and get in boxes. And that's what I was doing literally just now. So I've got paper cuts all over it, and I've got my mouth tastes like sticky tape, and I've just been putting all the kind of rewards and things together from the Kickstarter that we ran last year, 18 months ago, more than that, last May. But yeah, we've got our big boxes. Got lots of weighty stuff in it. And we've got that there, and then we've got each one of those has got a USB drive.
That's cool.
Cassette as well.
That's very cool.
Hang on, let me have a look. Oh, I don't know. Professional. Here we go. So each one's got like a little. So it has a little cassette like that, and then that's got a little pen drive that comes out.
How neat. So let me just ask you a quick question, then we'll move on. Were you expecting the cost of shipping to be so high? I mean, I imagine every time you said something now, it's like, whoo, that's a little bit higher than it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, since kind of like Brexit kind of kicked in as well, so even there's a cost to the US, I mean, that's gone up as well. Cost to Europe has gone up considerably since since we first kind of started putting costs together. We did know Brexit was on the horizon, so we did kind of build in contingency for that. Our postage and packaging costs that we've got are now all the contingency has been used up. So they basically we've not I don't think we've really lost anything on it, but we've certainly not made anything on it, which wasn't the intention anyway.
Right.
So we felt like, you know what, we don't know what prices are going to do, so we did a kind of rough estimate, say like for Europe probably this, for like further afield like this, and it looks like we were pretty bang on with it. So we're not rolling in profit from the shipping.
Well, that's good news right there. Well, actually, this is an idea that Jack pitched to me about the topic that we're discussing today. And then when we talked about it, we need to get a developer, someone who has a perspective, a modern developer. And first thing that Jack said was, let's get Tom on. Tom can talk. So prove him right.
You owe us a favor after that review.
Let's get Tom on. No, yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and I'll tell you right now, when I'm talking, like, I have not had an opportunity to play the game yet. Been completely busy, so I don't know if your game is easy or not. But you could tell us what your thoughts are from a dev's perspective. So yes, Jack, why don't you take the lead on this, since this is kind of your baby on it?
You want to talk about, just get into the meat of the matter? I thought we would start off with, like, maybe talking about some of the games that we played that, maybe sort of even reflect the transition from harder games as they used to be, I believe, to the very easy games they tend to be now. So, like, maybe go around and everyone, like, is there a game that stands out to you that was, like, really really difficult but satisfying, and was there any others that were, like, just too difficult and were sort of probably part of the reason why games have shifted in the direction they have?
Tom, you want to go first? Yeah.
So from my point of view, I kind of jumped straight into game dev, having not really played an awful lot of modern adventure games. So my experience almost begins and ends in the 90s. I played a couple of the Telltale games, like Tales from Monkey Island and the Back to the Future series and the Sam and Max ones as well. I don't remember them being particularly hard. I don't remember them getting stuck on them, but they sort of passed the time. To be honest, I don't really remember much about them. But my experience was, I grew up on King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry, Police Quest, and I think I played some of Space Quest as well, which are hard, and at a time where there's no internet, and I think I played King's Quest 4 for about a year, and there were like 4 or 5 friends, who would. We'd go and we'd try different things, and we'd like meet up like once a week, and then we'd sort of scribble like down, what have you got in your inventory?
Right.
I've got this, and what do you? And you're trying to figure out puzzles, and then when you find, I think I had a friend who'd gone to stay and he'd gone to live in America, and he came back, and he'd been playing loads of Sierra games, and we kind of said he'd apparently completed King's Quest 4, so we were just tapping him for knowledge the whole time, and every time he told us something like that, we never would have thought of that. And that seems to be one of the things. So I don't want to sort of go off on a tangent now, but when you were saying about where the difficulty comes from, my sort of perspective, the difficulty has been balancing logic as well, and it seems to be almost quite a loose term now. Some people, it's almost like the idea of moon logic has almost been kind of weaponized, like people can it's like you can get cancelled for it as soon as someone kind of shouts moon logic in a review about your game. That's it. It's a nail in the coffin. But it's in order to get around that moon. If you've got puzzles which aren't intuitive because they are literally, I have a key, I'm going in a door, it's going in a door, I'm opening it up, and I'm driving a car and I need to put petrol in, or whatever it is that is like people just instinctively know. If you're doing something that's slightly more outlandish, it's set in another world or something like that, then you need to put that kind of breadcrumb trail in throughout the puzzles and throughout the narrative in order to make it logical. But you have to draw the line somewhere, and there's a very fine line between giving enough clues so that someone can technically follow the breadcrumb trail and can logically solve a puzzle without any outside input whatsoever, but not giving them the actual answer. So it's how obscure you make how many little pieces you cut the answer into, and how you kind of present them is where that sort of balance of kind of logic and like logical and illogical lies. And if it's obvious to some people and not obvious to others, you can sort of that's the tricky thing to balance, and that's where I think a lot of people can kind of sort of fall foul on that, is that their idea of what's logical might well be logical to some people, but isn't for others. And then if you pander to that and you say, right, well, I'm going to make it as logical as I can for the vast majority, if not everyone, there are then going to be some people who say, well, that was too easy, because like they saw the breadcrumbs, they're veterans of the genre, and it's going, I saw it, I could see it coming a mile away. As soon as I saw that,
right,
swordfish over there, I knew I was going to have to battle that guy over there. And things like that seem obscure to someone might seem just obvious if you know what you're doing. So it's a very hard line to strike, and you can't please everyone. Sorry, that wasn't. What games have you played?
No, that's all right. In fact, I think you said something that I definitely want to put a pin in and talk about a little bit later on, because I think that may be one of the reasons you said that people are afraid of being canceled because reviews will say Moon Logic. And I can see how that is a fear, especially of the industry nowadays. Indie devs, new devs, such as yourself. That first game says a lot about your future. Are the games easier? I think it's safe to say yes. It's definitely safe to say yes. Some games, I'll just use a perfect example of completely easy compared to the past. Return to Monkey Island. If I have something negative to say about the game, it's that it was very easy. Obviously, as a veteran of gameplay, it's easier to walk through those type of things. You've done them before in just different ways, and it's overly intuitive. And I think there's something to say about having a balance between being too hard and being too easy. Return to Monkey Island, I did use a hint, which also makes it easier. So Beyond the Still Sky, another example, way too easy, and those are two of the biggest. I'd say the largest adventure games that I can think of off the top of my head that's come out over the past year or so. So, how about you, Jack?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no question that games are getting easier as a general trend. Tom, I think it's kind of interesting that you said you kind of missed out on the whole middle period where games started to become easier, and your influence was sort of still rooted in the sort of substantial games with actual puzzles and gameplay, because that's very much what lucid dreaming is, and it I think that's one of the reasons it got such a good score from us, which is it felt like such a substantial game, and we don't get that anymore. I'm not speaking personally here, but we did a review of The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow, and a lot of people loved it for its story and stuff, but our reviewer was just like, well, where's the game? There's until sort of later on, it's there just isn't enough game. It's too much story, and I'm editing more and more reviews that talk about how, well, there's really no puzzles and blah blah blah, but the story is great, and that's fine, but I think the pendulum has definitely swung a little bit too far. But even though I kind of, it's a common term and I've used it myself, I don't like the phrase dumbing down, because I kind of wonder if adventure games were really all that smart to begin with. I think this is something that Tom kind of mentioned. The phrase moon logic does sort of represent the kind of quote unquote intelligence that sort of too many of the older games required of players, and I don't really think it is smart. It's not smart puzzle design if you have to reverse engineer a solution to figure out what on earth the developer was thinking of, to arrive at that. So you end up just trying everything on everything, or you call up a hotline in the early days of Sierra and stuff, and I think games were made artificially difficult with pixel hunting and again moon logic and stuff like that. So games have gotten easier for sure, but I think that was an evolution that, in a way, needed to happen. I'd like to see games actually get smarter, not easier. You know what I mean? I don't want them dumber and easier. I want them smarter and easier. If you understand the distinction.
Well, why is that though? Let's talk about that for a second. Why do you think it went that way? I mean, because clearly it's not just something that we've all known. It's clearly something that the entire genre decided that it needs to be there. So why is that? Thoughts?
I think games have become much more transient in terms. So it's a much more fast moving industry than it was. Before you'd wait however long, a year or more for the next Sierra game to kind of come out, and you'd spend months playing it, and the studios could sort of rest assured that it would have that longevity to it. Now you don't, with the internet and with people just being able to kind of talk instantly kind of around the world, it's very easy to, if you get stuck on an adventure game, it's very, very easy to find the solution and to just not be stuck anymore. And I know people, now when people say, well, how long's the game? Well, it's 5 or 6 hours or, whatever it is. And it's like, well, if you'd asked me how long any of the games I played were when they lasted for months. And I don't know how long I spent playing on them. And obviously I was younger at the time, but you didn't, if you got stuck, you went to bed and you maybe came back to it the next week and you went, I'll try a few more things and, I'll think about it. And that was it. And because studios and developers don't have that luxury of time anymore, it's, I don't know, maybe the games have to be easier so that you can play them quickly without having to look up a solution. It's so easy now. I mean, I've had in the kind of people kind of feedback that I've had and in kind of reviews and things. There's a whole spectrum. People who said, like, I got stuck and I loved it, and it gave me that sense of that kind of that in sort of dopamine rush of like, oh my god, I've actually I feel like I've actually achieved something, and it gave that almost, it was almost nostalgic for people because like they hadn't felt that kind of difficulty and then that sort of self-satisfaction of being able to kind of solve a puzzle in that way for so long. And then there were other people who kind of said, well, I got stuck a bit, I had to use a walkthrough a couple of times, had to use hints, and there were other people who just went, yeah, it was really easy. And there's a kind of huge spectrum on there. But I mean, within a few hours of us releasing the game, there were full playthroughs, walkthroughs, let's plays on YouTube anyway. So anyone who wanted to find anything else about it. I mean, I think the last people who actually were able to kind of play it without that luxury were the people testing it. For me, because there was nothing, there was nothing kind of publicly out there, and there were kind of a few of them were sort of. I had a kind of Discord channel with all the testers in, and they were kind of sharing a few sort of bits amongst themselves. But quite often I'd sort of wake up in the morning and I'd have like a message saying I've got stuck, I don't know what to do, and then by the time I sort of got to it, 10 minutes later there'd be another one there saying, oh no, so I've got it, I found it, brilliant, and those are the puzzles that people enjoyed the most and remembered the most. But I think a lot of people are going to miss out on that because it's so quick and easy just to go on and go, what, I haven't got the time, I haven't got the patience to do this. I've got so many other games in my library now. It's not like I've got one game, but I'm playing this, I'm going to play it solidly. So I've got another 20 games, and if this one's getting me stuck, I'll move on to another one. I'll play that one, come back to it later. You might never come back to it. So it's
another good point.
It's a real pressure to make a game that people want to come back to and don't feel frustrated by. And I think that's one of the driving forces behind making them easier, because if you make it smooth, you make it easy, people will complete it, and then they'll write their review, and then they'll and that sort of feeds into the kind of the Steam algorithm or whatever, and that kind of helps. As soon as you make something in the game which is a barrier, some people are going to love it, but others are. It is going to be exactly that. It's going to be a barrier, and it's going to mean that your game doesn't get completed. You don't get the reviews. You don't necessarily get the good times and things associated with it. It's a real tightrope.
Why do you think, Jack? Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, do I have an opinion? How long
That's your job, is to have opinions. Yeah.
What do you mean? Is do I have an opinion I can condense into a podcast length answer? Yeah, certainly people's shortening attention spans are a realistic factor. It's a shame that they've become so disposable, but because I remember the days of spending like 100 hours playing a RPG on my Super Nintendo and stuff, and I was just like happy as a clam way back then. And now it's like, I will literally choose which game I can sneak in by its length. It's like, oh, a 10-hour game, not too long. Is there a 2-hour game I can play? So it's a reality. But to go back to my last answer, I think part of the evolution towards ease, I guess, is the fact that gamers kind of got like smarter and went, you know what? These are not smart puzzles we're being asked to answer. They're sort of artificially difficult ones. I think of that very famous Old Man Murray article about Gabriel Knight 3 killed the adventure genre, and people take that article way too literally. It was never about just Gabriel Knight 3 and it's one particular cat mustache puzzle. It was a ridiculous puzzle, but that was just emblematic of what adventure games were doing at the time. There was moon logic, and there were just incredibly silly things that gamers were being asked to do, and people went, you know what, we're kind of tired of this. So Gabriel Knight 3 alone wasn't responsible for the death of the genre, but certainly enough of that kind of experience contributed to people going, we've had enough. Like, give us something that at least makes sense. I think there's still a thirst for good puzzles, like the Portal games. I often rave about them, or Braid. Very, very challenging puzzle game, but tremendous response. So I think there's a thirst for smart puzzles, but not silly puzzles. So, I think moving away from the kinds of puzzles that used to really stump people is not necessarily a bad thing. I just think we went kind of too far, and we missed the lesson to be learned from it. It's like, don't remove the puzzles, just more clever. And just, I think the one other thing is that developers kind of went, you know what? There's a market for games that don't have a lot of puzzles, and I think that's really appealing for a developer, because when you think about it, a story and puzzles are pretty much antithetical elements in a game.
Good word.
The whole purpose of the story is to have a flow through, just to keep things moving. And the entire purpose of a puzzle is to, throw up an interruption. So, like, they're kind of always at odds. So it's, like, probably, I think, the hardest thing for a developer to do well is to find a way to integrate those two things. So I think more and more developers just kind of went, hey, if we don't have to integrate them, if people will still buy our games if we just leave the puzzles out, let's do that. That's a whole lot easier than
I went to
back and forth.
I was at Adventure X a couple of weeks ago, and there was a talk by Dave Gilbert there, who was talking about how he kind of put the narrative together in some of his earlier games. He said during COVID he'd sort of forgotten this, and he had to go back and kind of look through his old notebooks and kind of see how his process had worked. And it was very, very similar to my own, which was he didn't kind of worry too much about the overarching narrative. He just had some really nice ideas for puzzles and little mini stories in there. And then he kind of put them all in and then go, right, well, what connects these up? How can I thread a story through these and kind of then make it all work? And that's exactly what I did as well. So I didn't come, and I think a lot of devs and a lot of writers as well will come to producing a game because they've got a spectacular story and they've got a really good story that they want to say, and that's why you can get a lot of adventure games which have a lot of dialogue and a lot of story and a lot of kind of sort of exposition dumps in there. They kind of just go, this is like, it's like, they are like, interactive fiction.
Yeah.
Because that was the primary goal of it. Is like, we've got a story to tell. That's what we want, and we want to make a game. So let's stick a few puzzles. We can maybe get a bit of kind of character development that we reveal as we go along. But really, the puzzles, like you said, they're in there as a barrier to just to make it interactive. Whereas when I came to this, I wanted to make a game, and I had some cool ideas for some puzzles, and then I kind of made a story fit that. So I didn't have a kind of a story that I really, really wanted to tell, and my kind of creative vision that I needed to kind of express myself with. I just wanted to make something that was fun. So when testers or anyone, whoever came back to me after playing it and just went, I don't really get this, or this, this is like, fine, it comes out. I'm not precious about it, because my goal here isn't to tell my story. My goal is to make a game that people want to enjoy. So that was a much more collaborative thing with my kind of testers. And I mean, luckily, most of the things I put in, they kind of liked. It wasn't like I completely redid everything, but I wasn't prepared to do that. And I think maybe that's where you get the kind of the very story heavy games are born out of that. They're born out of a singular beautiful story idea, and then that's gamified rather than I want to make a game and let's then add a cool story that kind of does it all together. And I think you can probably go the other way as well, but I was sort of in the middle there, and that formula seems to have worked, and obviously works for Dave Gilbert as well. So that was really reassuring, because I was there kind of going, my God, is this even? Can I repeat this? Is this is this a valid workflow? Can I do this again? Did I just get lucky? But on kind of hearing him sort of talk about it in that way, it's actually that's just the way my brain works, and that's my approach to it. And the same thing.
See, I mean, from an artist's perspective, I mean, of course, my art comes from like the music, but so it's kind of you're reliant on people liking what you're putting out, I don't believe that we should make something with a fear of getting a bad review, that type of a thing. And you mentioned, if somebody says Moon Logic, that could tank you. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons why you have that fear in putting in there. So we've established the fact that it is easier. Okay, we talked a little bit about why. Do you think it's valid? Do you think it's gone too far? And this is Jack's question. I just stole it.
Do I think it's gone too far? I don't. I think the fear has. I think having talked to a lot of other developers, there is definitely a fear of like, what if my puzzle is illogical? And you can't. It's not something. It's very difficult to test logic yourself, because you have the burden of knowledge. You know where the puzzle came from. You know that you have to go there and do that, and that's why you need external testers for it. But logic is a subjective thing as well. What is yes, there are some things that are moon logic to you, wherever whoever you are, wherever you come from, that doesn't make sense. But there are things. It is a sliding scale. It depends on your background, your age. I mean, there are going to be some puzzles that maybe require you to just know what an object is, or how that object is used in real life. And not everyone's going to go and go, oh, I don't know what that object is. I'm going to go look it up online. And they go, oh, right, and now I have the context. So that, unless you explain it, that is moon logic, cultural thing. So, I mean, my game is very British. There's very British. I've had to make sure. I mean, there's one bit in it which was you have to turn like a socket on and off, and then at that point, so I've had to put a thing in there where the main character will say, oh, almost like a kind of fourth wall break. So, oh, by the way, in Britain we have switches on our sockets just in case you want to turn them on and off, like in case you need to know, because someone was saying to me, oh, in America you don't have switches to turn them off. And it's like, really? Oh no, I suppose you don't, do you? And it's like, but it's like we do. They're everywhere. It's like, it's regulation. You can't not have them. Maybe we've always had them. So it's things like that. It could just be a cultural thing, and you can very easily then be be sort of, like I say, cancelled for that because someone somewhere doesn't think it's logical. I can't remember what the question was. I just gone off again.
No, you answered it in regards to the moon logic. So he left it from the fear aspect. So Jack, as the reviewer, someone who is in the industry and has been for 20 years, has seen the development, seen the change. Is it something that you think as a whole it's gone too far?
Yeah, I do think it has. I mean, obviously there are still exceptions, every year. But as a general rule, the percentage of games that could... I'll tell you what, like, it probably took me 15 years of playing adventure games to play my first one without using a walkthrough, and now I can, pretty much do it with every game that I play. So, like, if I can get through a game without a walkthrough, it's a lot easier. But because I am not good at adventure game puzzles. But like, having said that, I like the diversity too, and not every... There shouldn't be one formula for every game. The amount of puzzles and gameplay should fit the story that you're trying to tell. Like, obviously, The Walking Dead, one of the games which really contributed to the sort of quote unquote dumbing down of the genre, like, really suited the gameplay light formula. I mean, you're living in a world of undead with strangers with different dynamics, so you want a character drama with a little bit of danger. It wouldn't make sense to have a ton of puzzles in a story like that. So, and any artist should tailor the gameplay to the story that they're trying to tell. But I would like to see developers be a little bit braver about reintroducing puzzles, because I think there is still an audience for that. But they just need to make them smarter. Don't make them artificially difficult with pixel hunting. The sorts of things that used to make us take 3 months to finish a game, kind of thing. So it can be done, but it's just really, really difficult. But that's the challenge.
And maybe I'm grandpa get off my lawn type of guy, but I think it's gone way too far. Completely too far. If I wanted to read a book, I'll read a book. If I want to watch a movie, I'll watch a movie. It's the interactivity is in many games is all but gone.
Yeah.
And the most easy way of knowing that it's something that they're actively trying to do for whatever reason it may be is like whenever a remaster comes out, and every big game gets a remaster. It's not a matter of just okay, I'm going to make this look better. I'm going to clean up some music a little bit, clean up some graphics. No, they take away things that were difficult, like they take deaths out, or all of these type of things that allegedly people complained about. I want to have a little bit of a challenge, especially if I'm going to be paying a decent amount of cash. I don't want to play a game that's over 6 hours. I mean, of course it varies depending on how much I'm going to pay, but I want a little bit of a challenge. I want puzzles, because that's what I view an adventure game as. That's my perspective, is I want to be challenged. I want to have a puzzle in my game. And perhaps it's just gone so far to where, I have lost sight of what the modern adventure is, that maybe I'm just overlooking it. But I think that I would like to see it kind of go back a little bit. So how can it go back? Well, what's some ways to keep it relatively simple, but make a challenge, bring the challenge back?
I wonder whether we need some kind of traffic light system or something. No, because like Jack was saying, easy games are valid for a lot of reasons. They have different weighting. They are, maybe the puzzles aren't relevant to the story. Maybe the story itself is, it's an interactive fiction. That is the primary kind of goal, is to tell a story. Or maybe they are just aimed at younger players. So I mean, I've played Return to Monkey Island with my 8-year-old, We still haven't completed it yet. Not because it's hard, but just because he just spends the whole time just running around Mega Island, not really doing anything. But we also played Lost in Play, which is, as far I know, it's a beautiful game, and to play it with a young child is just magical, because it's absolutely perfect. If you are a seasoned adventure game player, you are not going to get you're not going to get your money's worth from it, because it is not that long. It is lots of little sort of mini games with some very kind of simple point and click sort of puzzle stuff in between. But if you are a young child who wants to interact with their Saturday morning cartoon, it's absolutely perfect. So I don't think it's necessarily that we need to say those are wrong. Because they're not hard enough, therefore they're not adventure games. They are. Adventure games is a much broader category now than it ever was. But we almost see, like, I feel like going out when having released a game, it'd be really nice to be able to say, look, here's a bit like you get on food packaging. So this is my game. This is how I've self-read. This is the age rating I'd say it is. This is the difficulty rating I'd say it is. This is how many puzzles to expect, so that it gets reviewed like based on what I'm telling you it's got. So rather than someone going, well, I like puzzle platformers. What's this shit? It's like no, it was never supposed to be that. So it is the game that I've created is very much based on games I played in the 90s. Some people absolutely love that. Some people, it's not what they grew up with, and it's not what they would expect, and it's not what they like. Like say, younger players would probably just they get frustrated and they go, no, it's not, it's not for me. So I kind of go, I don't sort of necessarily feel that everything needs to be kind of returned back to the way it was, despite the fact that that's what I personally like playing. But I do feel like there should be, having been on, being on the receiving end of reviews, good and bad, mostly good, but some, based on sort of misunderstandings of what the game was supposed to be and who it was supposed to be for. And I go, well, I played this game and I really hate this kind of thing. It's like, well, it does say that on the, you know what I mean? It's like you can't, if you don't like that kind of humor, or you don't like that kind of thing, read what's on the box. Sure. Like, you wouldn't buy it, but that's not when you send as a when you're releasing a game, you send a load of Steam keys out. You're sending to reviewers, hoping that that's the kind of thing that they like, and it might not be. It might be they go, oh yeah, go on, I will review it. No, not for me. But because you've not been able to kind of say this is the kind of thing that I've made in this, it's intentionally like this for this kind of reason, it just gets sort of marked as against whatever that person does or doesn't like, which is it's absolutely that's just the way the industry works. That's the way film reviews work, books reviews work. Reviews of any kind are always going to be down to personal opinion. But I do wonder whether, I don't think it would ever be practical, but it would be nice to be able to say this is this kind of game, and this is sort of like an adventure game kind of health card. This is what to expect. Would be handy for kind of players and devs to kind of mitigate people just being wrongly paired with the wrong game.
Jack, I think that's something that we might want to look into in our reviews, is to give it a difficulty grade or something. I think I couldn't have thought of a better idea as to how, this is what the developer's perspective is. This is what we were shooting for. Grade us based on that, buy the game based on that.
Well, it's certainly our policy to grade a game based on what it's trying to be, not what our expectations of it is. So that's already ingrained in what we're trying to do. That we've toyed with even having like a difficulty rating, but it's so subjective.
It is,
and like, even if we all agreed on what was hard or easy, how do you grade the difficulty of a game that's mostly easy but has two really hard puzzles? You know what I mean? All of a sudden your rating system gets thrown out the window. Like, except for the 2 times I needed the walkthrough, it was really easy. It's like, okay, you're not being honest anymore. So Like, there's just no real easy way. For
no,
a reviewer,
it was a dream of an idea, but no, but that's almost what you know, in an ideal world, that's what you'd be able to have, so that no one would get paired with the wrong game. But but yeah, no, I mean, like, logistically, it's always going to come down. It's going to be created by humans for humans, and you are always going to end up with subjectivity in it.
I mean, we haven't abandoned the idea. We may still do something with it, but I'm just like explaining why it's not such a slam dunk to go, oh yeah, let's just implement that.
I wasn't like
no, I didn't mean that.
Kind of,
let's get real, though.
Listening.
You know, I mean, like, Ron Gilbert's created Putt Putt. He created that for children. He created Return to Monkey Island, and the difficulty level is not any different. So I mean, think about it. That is annoying for someone who played all of the Monkey Island games. I'm going into that thinking I'm playing a difficult, especially when you have 3 modes of difficulty on it. I choose hard mode, and I have 0 obstacles. It's basically just telling me the story I'm walking through because I know exactly what I'm supposed to do as I do it. You know, you're just telling me a story at that point. And to me, that's frustrating because I'm buying a game as what it has been sold in the past. Now, there's a different difficulty level between a child's game, something that's pitched and sold to a kid, and pitched and sold to an adult. But, yeah, this is a really interesting topic. Jack, did you have anything else to say about that? I saw you starting to talk, yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that frustrates me about so many games, and I think sort of this is the one lesson that I wish developers had learned instead of just taking puzzles out or making them too easy, is learn how to clue better. There's got to be a way to layer clues in so that you have a sense if you're on the right track or not. Too many adventure games are all or nothing. You either figure out the answer or you have like no idea if you're close or if you're, barking up the wrong tree or anything. There's got to be a way to kind of layer in clues, not have more clues, like just so that there's so many that the solution is obvious, but to layer them in so that if you try something that isn't working but is along the right lines, that then opens up a different layer of clues.
Are you talking about like a hint system, or are you talking about as the game progresses?
No, I'm talking about making a layered hint system the actual gameplay. Mm-hmm. Like, you shouldn't have to click on a separate button to have a different suggestion. Well, like it wouldn't work exactly the same way, but there's got to be kind of a layering. Where let's say if you try to solve a puzzle this way, just trying it and getting no, that didn't work is useless to a game, and it's frustrating. You go, well, was I close? Was that a good idea and it just didn't work, or did I do it too soon, or you know what I mean? And I wish if there was another layer of clues in there just to kind of give you a sense of where you are. I haven't sort of honed the idea yet, but I think there's something in there. I don't think adventure games clue well.
Doesn't that kind of go back to the idea that perhaps the adventure games nowadays are not as well written as they used to be?
But I don't.
That could because they don't have the same type of staff that they used to, or the game is largely indie devs, or the genre is largely indie devs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but those older games didn't do that aspect of the game any better. It was just we were more understanding of hard puzzles then, and we were more accepting of spending a long time on a puzzle.
That's true.
Which we aren't anymore. But I don't think they actually handled the puzzle itself any better back then. Again, I talk about the artificial difficulty. So I think there is a middle ground if developers like include puzzles, be brave enough to include puzzles, but find a way to layer in your clues so that you're rewarding players for experimenting and having ideas. I don't know. I may have to make a game to figure out how to implement it properly.
That was kind of my approach to it. So in a few different ways. So most of the breadcrumb trails. So there were some that I'd put in there. I'd say almost by the time I'd finished, 90% of the layered clues that went in there were ones that were added after or during the testing period. So when people try the things that as a developer, it's almost impossible to think unless you write a response for absolutely everything. And even then, you're not necessarily thinking, well, the reason they used that with that is because they were trying to solve a puzzle like halfway through the game. It's only when watching people play, you go, oh, and you literally, especially when you watch people kind of streaming a game, they'll go, oh, well, I know I need to do this and I need to go that right. I need to go and get the ladder, and go, shit, I forgot about the ladder. And all of a sudden, you go, right, okay, so now I'm there watching, like every time I'm watching people play, it's like make a note of that, make a note of that, make a note of that. And we were in a kind of a very lucky position because my wife Emma does the main voice of our kind of protagonist. So if I want to set up our vocal booth and send her off into the spare room, say I need you to record another 10 lines, we can do that. But that is it. We've got over 11,000 lines of text in the game. So when that's the kind of the level of detail that I feel you kind of, we've got loads of unnecessary like jokes and puns and stuff in there that don't need to be in there really. But in terms of the sort of layering, you need that level of detail in order to be able to anticipate, everyone plays differently and everyone's brain works differently. In the demo, we had the amount of people who tried to, there's a glass of milk, you have to warm the glass of milk. And like so many people, it's like, oh, I want to put it on top of the fish tank. I don't even thought about the fact that the fish tank would be warm. Or like they put it on the washing machine. It's like, so there's all these different things that those are the places where you put the breadcrumb. Those are the places where you're going to go, oh no, I can't do that. Maybe I should do this, or I'd need to do something a bit more, and kind of frame it in a way that makes them kind of go, oh, I need to sort of think of it in a slightly different way. But that comes with, if you're just doing a kind of text only puzzle game, fine. It is more work to do that, obviously. But I agree. I think that layering of clues is absolutely how you find the right balance. Yeah. You put too many obvious clues in there, it becomes too easy. You put too few in there, it becomes moon logic. You fill in the gap between the two with this sort of grey area that covers the whole sort of narrative in this sort of film of little bits of advice and little sort of things just going in here that just sort of push you in the right direction.
So what about like adding in some sort, and we're going a little long, and I want to, this is just such an interesting topic, so I appreciate if you indulge me just a few more minutes here. What about adding in a fail-safe type of situation? As an example, in Leisure Suit Larry, you don't even realize that it's telling you what to do. Leisure Suit Larry 7, like for instance, if you're kind of going about doing the same thing over and over again, you'll get a little announcement on the PA with a little clue, that's whether you're consciously or subconsciously hearing it or something, it's planting that little seed in your head. What if it's constantly trying to mix or something, then have the character say something along the lines of, say something about, hey, you're going in the wrong direction type of thing. Maybe, add an obvious clue in that way. Is that difficult or it's not done very often? Let me ask you.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the structure of the puzzle. So in some puzzles, it's very easy to, detect when an action is being repeated. But then also some things are what feel like they're being repeated to the player. Like I'm trying to use and look at and things like, whatever. I'm trying to interact with all these things around this area. And that feels like I'm spending a lot of time doing something repetitive in this area, but I found all of the, I know I need to do, I think I need a piece of broken glass to cut something. So I'm going to try this on every single window in the whole town, and that's, and that would feel like a repetitive thing. And if you watch someone play it, you kind of go, oh, I could build in a fail-safe that sort of, guides them in the right direction for that. But that might just be one or two players that try that. It could be other people who think something completely different. So it depends. If there are puzzles that are very obviously you're trying to brute force something, and it's kind of obvious in the way that the code is working that it can kind of tick and go, right, I make a little note of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, I've done this enough times now, I'll give them a bit of a clue. But not everything. It depends on just how the puzzles are structured. When there's so many different kinds of puzzle. There's musical puzzles, dialogue puzzles, fetch quests, everything. It's and I suppose that's where the hint systems that you're seeing now are born out of. They were born out of kind of, well, we can't kind of catch every sort of situation where a failsafe might be needed. Therefore, let's just let the player decide when they've had enough, and they can go right, and then they'll see something contextual and say, oh right, I can see what I need to do now, and kind of get a bit of a kind of a nudge in the right direction. But I always feel like it's one of those. It's like when you look at a walkthrough and like you go, oh, can I see a hint? Can I see a hint? I want to see half the hint. So, oh no, as soon as you see it, you kind of wish you hadn't seen it, and it's a hard thing to do, and you never know with a hint system whether it's going to reveal everything, or it'll just tell you, well, I knew that, but I didn't know that, but I only knew that. I didn't want to know all of that. I just wanted to know that bit, and it's very hard. Everybody draws the line somewhere different for that.
It's kind of like the end of a chapter in a book where something really exciting's happening, and when you're going to see something that you don't want to, you put your hand towards the bottom of the chapter, so you don't actually see the last part. Yeah.
I saw a word there.
Yes. So this is great, Jack. Do you have anything else to add to this before we go on to the next segment?
No, I just want to say that Tom touched on my last point, which I've harped on before, is do more playtesting. Not beta testing. Adventure game developers are pretty good at beta testing, but I don't think they do enough play testing. And I don't mean have a few friends play the game and report back, but like as Tom does, like watch them play, find out where your bottlenecks are and where people are, cruising through that you thought, oh, this might slow them down a bit. Like look for see the tendencies for yourself, so you'll know where the issues are in between what you intended and what the player is experiencing. You're never going to get them all because, everyone's experience is different. But the only way to learn is to see people actually playing your game.
Definitely.
So it's crucial.
Yeah, when I took the demo of Lucid Dreaming 2, I took it to 3 different conventions, all within like a week period, back down just in kind of March this year. And that was just the best way of seeing, because you're not just seeing what people are trying. You're seeing what they're missing. You're seeing stuff that they're trying, and you're also seeing what their reactions are. So, what kind of jokes are falling flat, or what are they smiling at this? Are they looking frustrated? Are they just looking around? Are they going, where's my husband gone? Or you know what I mean? It's like, oh,
do I look stupid here?
Yeah. So it was, and I honestly think that I took so many lessons from that, and then worked them back into a lot of it into the UI as well, into just the general kind of just trying to make it smoother, trying to make just smoothing over the cracks and polishing stuff. But also just lessons learned. It's like you can't do that kind of thing because people just get stuck and they just don't. You can tell they don't like it. So just and I suppose I spent a lot of time when I was polishing the final version of the game as well. I ended up automating a lot of things. So there were things where you'd have to do something and then use something and then do something else in order to kind of act this sequence out. And about that point I was pretty confident the game was long enough, so it was like I don't need to be putting any of this kind of stuff to artificially lengthen it, so I'm going to automate that because it's obvious what their intention is from the first point. They're using a fish on a whatever, they've got it, they know what they're doing. They're not just trying that randomly, or if they are, fine, but that they've got the intention. Therefore let that let that sequence play through. There's no point in then going, oh, well, hang on, I thought something was going to happen, and then they wander off because they didn't realise they then had to pick up the fish and do it again, or whatever it was. I haven't even there wasn't even a fish, but whatever it is, that's that kind of thing. So I ended up smoothing over a lot of those things that were unnecessarily sort of stepped and didn't need to be. And although it would have shortened the game slightly, it made the whole narrative and the whole sort of thing much smoother.
I think we could do 3 or 4 shows worth of dialogue on this topic. It's something it's interesting and also needed. But let's go ahead and move on a little bit into the next episode. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. As if that wasn't fun enough, we're going to talk about 5 franchises plus 1 that we would like to see converted into an adventure game. There's been some great ones that have become over the past 15 years. Let's talk about ones that we would like to see out there. And Tom, since you are the guest, you're going to get to go first.
Well, you asked. I saw you asked this on Facebook as well, and I replied to that. I did a little comment there, so I'm going to go with what my comment said as well, which was there's a graphic novel / comic series by a guy called Luke Pearson called Hilda, and which has also now been turned into a Netflix series as well. Which is, I can just thoroughly recommend. It is wholesome and funny and brilliant and just hugely creative, as are the kind of the graphic novels that it was based on. But it's a beautiful kind of almost Scandinavian troll, almost like kind of Icelandic sort of setting with giants and trolls and these and kind of elves and creatures in it. But it's also very, very funny. The humour probably more so in the series, in the Netflix series than the comics is quite British sort of humour as well. So it's a British kind of voice cast. Actually, I don't know. Maybe it's only a British voice cast in Britain. I don't know, but as far as I know, it is. And that for me, obviously resonates. But it's brilliantly written, and it's absolutely stunning as well. The quality of the animation in it and the quality of the artwork in it is beautiful. It very much Lost in Play, going back to that again, very much reminds me of a very similar aesthetic in terms of the kind of the creatures and the even just down to the kind of the color tones and things that are used. It's absolutely beautiful. And when I've been watching that with my family, I many times I've been thinking this would make an amazing adventure game, because the stories and the characters are so unique and so original and unexpected. The kind of twists and turns that they take, you wouldn't want to obviously replicate exactly the same story that's in the show, because then essentially you're just going through the motions of that. But the formulas that they've obviously used for the kind of writing the story and the kind of the dialogue in it would just be, I'd love to interact with it.
Well, I'm gonna have to look that up tonight. Actually, Hilda, Hilda, huh?
Hilda,
all right.
It's so much fun. I love it.
Jack?
My first one probably would have been far more relevant about 10 years ago, but I'm going to go with Harry Potter. There was like an actual sort of kid-like action adventure series back then, but they were very simplistic with duels and silly stuff like that. It was just not good games. So, but I think there's what a world to tap into, and just Hogwarts itself is a puzzle to be solved. I think there's a ton of gameplay potential to be tapped in the world of Harry Potter. So I think that'd be fun.
That's actually a great idea. And I know that there's been a couple action style RPG games and everything, but I don't think they can tell the story quite like an adventure game could. Well, I think when I think of an adventure game, the first thing that pops in my head is going out and finding treasure, going out and having an adventure. I think of Indiana Jones, that type of a thing. And as I mentioned, I probably wrote down 40 or 50 things of this because I was going to do a YouTube video about this like 2 or 3 months ago. I couldn't think of any of them like the last few days. But National Treasure I know was number one on my list. It's just everything that I would want to see in a game. It's everything.
Yeah.
Puzzle solving, going around, johnning around the world. You know, there's a love interest, but it's not an overt love interest. It's just it's a perfect story, especially number one to base an adventure off of.
Can't argue with that.
Tom, what's your next one?
Again, this is one that I've often it's my favorite book of all time, and also my favorite film of all time. And somebody else said it as a comment under the same thing on Facebook. And as soon as they said it, I went, yeah. I sort of thought to myself, yeah, I should have said that. And it's the Princess Bride.
My wife said that.
Sorry,
that was my wife who said that.
I didn't. I saw it was another Cleveland, but I didn't know if it was your wife or not. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've kind of read the book as well, but it's. I read it about 20 odd years ago, and it's stuck with me so much. It's so kind of meta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's beautifully written, and it's so much fun. And I feel it's better than the film, and I love the film an awful lot. And I know there was a Princess Bride game that kind of came out a while ago. I've not been able to find much kind of footage of it. It seemed to be just kind of a series of little puzzle things rather than like an adventure game particularly. But I feel like as an adventure game, it's literally written like a video game anyway. I don't know whether that's just partially down to the way that it's kind of set like in the book in a sort of meta way. But it's the way the puzzles and just the characters and like you said, this kind of this treasure and adventures. It's got swashbuckling. It's got what I mean. It's full of just cool stuff.
I never knew that was a book up until a couple months ago. I was saying I was going down a list, and I actually found out about the book, and I looked into it, and I heard there's so much more in the movie. Oh, wow. Like when they go into like the lair to try to get Dread Pirate Roberts or whatever his name is. I can't think is they have to go down, and there's like all these different levels of I've been meaning to actually pick it up, go to the library or something to read it.
I can't recommend it. When you read it, you'll kind of go, what? This isn't what I was expecting at all. It's honestly, it's a beautifully layered thing. It is really meta. It's a book about a book, and it's just genius. And it's written by William Goldman, who wrote the screenplay for The Princess Bride and like many other fantastic films as well. Brilliant screenwriter, but he wrote the book as well. So obviously the film adaptation was obviously very, very sympathetic to that. But the book is, you know what? I want to go and read it again now. It's genius. It's absolute genius.
Jack?
I had to go with one that won't seem very adventure-y when I first say it, and it didn't strike me that way at first either. But then I thought about it more, and I went, you know what? There's a lot of potential there. And that is Better Call Saul.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. It's obviously be a very character-driven game, but I mean, I missed the series already. It wrapped up. Was it 6 seasons, I think, and just amazing show. But I mean, he's a lawyer and he's a scoundrel, so there could be lots of. Again, I look for sort of gameplay segments, not just a great story. So I think there's sort of lawyerly potential there, but also sort of the con artist side. So I think there's potential for some fun gameplay. But the one caveat is it must have Bob Odenkirk for voice acting, or else the whole deal is off. I mean,
isn't that odd how you watch something like that, and if they change one little aspect of, especially like such a prominent voice or something, it's not the same. They cheated on you.
Yeah, the whole deal's off if Odenkirk isn't in it.
Well, for my last one, I wanted to choose one of the greatest books of all time, the Count of Monte Cristo. However, I decided to choose my actual favorite book of all time, which is very, very similar. It's a book called Fair Blows the Wind by Louis L'Amour. And it had everything. You know, he's known for cowboy, western types of books, but he created a pirate book. And this book is about, it's all... So his father gets killed, and so he devotes his life to improving, finding the greatest like sword masters and everything, and improving his skill with the sword because he wants to take vengeance on this character named Rafe Leckenby, which also manages to be like a prolific and swordman himself and fierce pirate and also a nobleman. And so the whole book is just, you know, you go from location to location in like the late 1700s. You deal with cannibals. You have to handle all of these situations, and finally, you have a show off with each other that it just leads so perfectly into it, and I think it would create like a wonderful intro to the adventure game and lead anticipation the whole way into the end, so a climax. And so, Fair Blows the Wind. Awesome, guys. I want to thank you, Tom, for joining us today and giving us an hour and a half of your time. It just went like that.
It did.
And obviously, once again, Jack, always a pleasure to speak with you. What do we got going on this week at Adventure Game Hotspot?
Full week of reviews again coming up. I think first up is the case of the Golden Idol, which fans of Return of the Obra Dinn will very, very much want to read. We've got a review of another FMV gameplay light FMV game called The Gallery. And Friday's still kind of up in the air. If the stars align, hopefully we'll have a review of that super easy game, Return of Monkey Island. But if not, maybe the new Tales of the Borderlands or something like that. Lots in the works anyway.
Tom, tell everybody where they can find the game, and you.
Oh, me. So I am Tool Story Games on pretty much every social media channel. It's just, Tool Story Games, all one word, on Twitter for as long as that lasts, Instagram and YouTube, Facebook. And then the game is currently on Steam and the Apple App Store on iOS and Google Play for Android as well. And we are currently working on a Switch port, and also it has been accepted onto the GOG store as well, so that we are
congratulations
of getting that uploaded to GOG actually, hopefully over the next sort of couple of weeks as well. So yeah, it's on itch.io as well. So yeah, it's all over the place. But yeah, you can find it. Do a search for it. It's everywhere.
And Jack, tell them where they can find us.
Oh, you tune into our website which is just past its 1 month anniversary, by the way. I can't believe it's been that long. But at adventuregamehotspot.com for reviews and trailers and new game announcements and a whole lot more.
And guys, I wanted you to do us a favor and go over to YouTube. You will find this podcast and all of our other, well, I shouldn't say all of them, the last 3 past podcasts over on our YouTube website. We have it for Adventure Game Hotspot on YouTube. So you can find that. It'll also be in the show notes. And if you listen to this on podcasts, like and rate it 5 stars if you liked it. If not, rate it 5 stars anyways. For Tom, for Jack, I am Joshua. We appreciate you all, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.